Okay, for part 2 of your Kin 425 class for Wednesday, March 3rd, I want to go over these two questions that I also posted for Monday's class. So these are questions that have to do with metabolic equivalence. So the first question I've asked about skateboarding, it requires about 5.5 METs. So I'm just pulling these numbers from these energy expenditure tables that you can find for different activities. So the question here, first one is, does the intensity threshold meet the standard of moderate vigorous as recommended by physical activity guidelines? And it does. So the cutoff for moderate intensity is about 3 METs. The cutoff for vigorous is about 6 METs. So this is almost vigorous. And then the second part here, if a 70 kilogram individual spends 30 minutes skateboarding, how many calories will they have expended? So again, I'm going to go over to the whiteboard. So I've given you these numbers in the question. 5.5 METs is the energy expenditure. The person is 70 kilograms. They're skateboarding for 30 minutes. You have to use this equation. So the fact that your 1 MET is equal to 1 calorie per kilogram per hour. So 5.5 METs would be 5.5 calories per kilogram per hour. The person weighs 70 kilograms, so to get your total calories, you just have to multiply by their body weight, and that cancels out the kilograms, and then you have to multiply by the hours, and that cancels out that hour. So you've got 5.5 kcal per kilogram hour times 70 kilograms times 0.5 hours, and that gives you your answer in calories. So you should end up with approximately 193 calories from that answer. So there's kind of a look at the whole answer there. So the second question is a practical question about someone that wants to go biking with their friends. The individual from a VO2 max test has a VO2 max of 38 milliliters per kilogram minute. And from this test, you've determined their anaerobic threshold to be about 65% of their VO2 max. The question here is whether they're in good enough physical condition to go on a sustained bike ride. And biking, again, from these metabolic tables requires an intensity of about 8 METs. So the question is this individual in sufficient condition to successfully perform this activity? So again, I'm going to go over to the whiteboard here. I've given you these numbers. The person's VO2 max is 38. Biking requires about 8 METs. Their anaerobic threshold is 65% of their VO2 max. So if you work out the oxygen consumption at their anaerobic threshold, it's just going to be 65% multiplied by 38. So at their anaerobic threshold, their oxygen consumption is about 24.7 mils per kilogram minute. Now you have to use a different METs equation here. So this is another way to express 1 MET, is that it is equivalent to 3.5 milliliters of oxygen consumed per kilogram minute. So 8 METs would be 8 times that number. 8 METs, that's the intensity of the cycling exercise, requires an oxygen consumption of 28 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram minute. So that's the VO2 oxygen consumption that you would have if you're out for a standard bike ride. The person's anaerobic threshold equaled 24.7 milliliters per kilogram minute. So if they're out for a standard bike ride, you can see that they will be above their anaerobic threshold during that bike ride. And so if you're working above your anaerobic threshold, it's an intense exercise, and you won't be able to sustain that exercise for a very long period of time. So since this person's VO2 requirement is above their anaerobic threshold, I would say that they will be above their anaerobic threshold and they won't be able to sustain that cycling exercise for a very long period of time.